At exactly 9:01 a.m. on live national TV, Jasmine Crockett was told her district, and for others held by Black and Latino leaders, would be erased from the new Texas map. She stood up, voice shaking with fury, and held up a red folder the GOP never saw coming. Inside, audio of Trump ordering her political execution, word for word. America gasped, one lawmaker fainted, the chamber turned to ash. But here's the real question. If they could erase her, how many voices have already disappeared before we even noticed? Texas looked like it was on fire from above, not the wildfire kind. The silent kind, the kind that spreads on paper, in sealed rooms, in maps drawn behind closed doors. A red line here, a boundary shift there, the kind of flame that doesn't burn buildings, just entire communities, off the map. It was 2:14 a.m. when Jasmine Crockett's phone rang. Unknown number, but the voice on the other end didn't hesitate. "They're drawing you out," the woman whispered, breathless. "5 seats, yours is one of them." "You need to see this." Before Jasmine could speak, the call dropped. No name, no callback, just silence and the weight of betrayal. She sat up in bed, heart pounding like thunder in her ears. 5 seats, her seat. Redistricting wasn't supposed to happen again until the next census. That was the rule, but Texas was never about rules. Texas was about power and who gets to hold the pen. Texas was never about rules. Texas was about power and who gets to hold the pen. By 3 a.m., she was at her kitchen table, laptop glowing in the dark like a warning flare. The leaked memo had been uploaded anonymously to an encrypted Dropbox, no sender. Just the subject line, Trump memo, Operation Red Sweep. Inside, she found everything: scanned legislative drafts, internal GOP emails, even a digital mock-up of a new congressional map. 5 districts led by minority Democrats were slated to be strategically consolidated. The words were clinical. The effect was lethal. Jasmine's district was unrecognizable, gone, absorbed into a red sea. She stared at the map for what felt like hours. Then, her breath caught. A familiar name, Jake Callahan. A Republican from Amarillo. On the draft, her district's remains had been merged with his. A pairing that made no demographic, geographic, or historical sense, unless the only logic was elimination. Jasmine pushed her laptop away. Rage climbed up her spine like a virus, not anger, fire. The kind that makes your hands shake but your voice steady. The kind that's not afraid to break things or expose them. Because this wasn't just politics. This was a blueprint for erasure. Her phone buzzed again, this time a text. "You weren't supposed to see that. No name, no emoji." Just 6 words that felt like a noose tightening. She looked out the window. Dallas slept quietly under a sky that didn't know, not yet, that its representation was being stolen in the dark. Jasmine reached for her red folder, the one she hadn't opened since January 6th. Inside it were files, testimonies, documents that had once felt too dangerous to reveal. Now, they felt like her only shield. She whispered to herself, "Not this time," then louder, like a vow, "Not without a fight." Because when someone tries to delete you from your own home, what do? You redraw the map, with truth and fire. What would you do if someone tried to delete your name from your own home? The invitation was never meant for her. It was printed on thick stock, watermarked with the state seal, coded in vague formalities. Strategic session on legislative optimization, confidential attendance required. Jasmine Crockett got it from a staffer who'd been working double shifts and was too exhausted to realize he'd left it in the copy tray. One glance at the names listed and her stomach dropped. Speaker Garrison, Sen. Holloway, Representative Jake Callahan. And Stephen Miller. No Democrats, no press, no transparency. Just silence behind heavy doors. She didn't wait for permission. By 10:42 a.m. the next morning, she was inside the Capitol Annex, dressed like a policy aide, clipboard in hand, AirPods in, pretending to be on a call. Her badge, a forgery, scanned from an old ID, printed under duress. She didn't care. This wasn't about protocol, this was survival. Down the hallway marked staff only, she found the room. Heavy walnut doors, no security, just trust in secrecy. She slipped in through the catering corridor, crouched behind a supply curtain where the acoustics were sharp, unfiltered. What she heard in the next 8 minutes would alter the trajectory of the entire country. A voice crackled over speakerphone, unmistakable, slow, arrogant, familiar. "Donald J. Trump, we don't need her," he said, as if swatting a fly. "We need 5 more red seats, period. Draw her out. Make it legal later, just make it happen now." The room laughed. Someone else spoke next, colder, more surgical. "Already in progress, sir," said Stephen Miller. "Operation Red Sweep is finalizing demographic inversion zones. Urban extraction paired with rural saturation. Her district merges with Amarillo. She won't stand a chance." Jasmine felt her breath lock. She hit record on her phone. 24 seconds of tape. Enough to blow a congressional ethics hearing off its hinges. But also enough to end her career if leaked the wrong way. She peeked through a sliver in the curtain. Stephen Miller stood by the digital projector, gesturing at a blood-red map where communities she knew, Oak Cliff, Pleasant Grove, South Dallas, were vanishing under red overlays like tumors spreading. "You redraw the districts," he continued. "You redraw the future. You erase her, and others follow." Her hands trembled. She could feel her pulse inside her teeth. Suddenly, a loud bang. A tray of glasses dropped near the catering door. Heads turned. She slipped out, ducked into a maintenance stairwell, heart in her throat. Outside, she clutched her phone like a grenade. She had the tape, the voices, the plan, the intent, the proof. But if she used it too soon, they'd spin it as deepfake, use it too late, and the vote would pass. And if she used it at all, she might not survive the storm. She looked down at the glowing screen, audio files saved. Then up at the Capitol dome, its flags fluttering in a wind that suddenly fell to quiet. If you held a secret that could detonate the very floor beneath the nation's feet, would you dare pull the trigger? The room smelled like stale coffee and panic. 3 Democrats, for closed blinds, and 1 state-sized betrayal sat between them. Jasmine stood at the center, still in her black blazer from the infiltration. Her phone, the audio file of Trump and Stephen Miller's plan, rested on the table like a loaded weapon no one wanted to touch. Across from her, Greg Kossar, eyes darting, Lloyd Doggett, pale but steady. Sylvia Garcia, arms crossed, mouth pressed into a line sharp enough to cut glass. "No press," Kossar warned, his voice low. "We don't leak until we've filed for injunctions. We follow protocol." "And how long does that take?" Jasmine fired back. "Because every hour we wait, they lock in the lines. They bury us quietly and call it procedure." Garcia broke the silence. "You release that tape without legal backing. They'll call it fake news. They'll call you a criminal. You'll be the headline, not the map." Doggett leaned forward. "Jasmine, listen. We all know this is a hit job, a political hit job dressed up as legislation. But this isn't a courtroom, it's a landmine. And you just stepped on it." Jasmine didn't blink. "Then maybe it's time to let it blow." He stared at her, then said it, the thing that had been bubbling under the surface since that red map was leaked. "Maybe they're coming for you because you're the loudest." And there it was, silence, thick like oil. Garcia looked away. Doggett flinched. Jasmine inhaled slowly, as if deciding whether to scream or break. "I'm loud," she said, voice razor flat. "Because when I wasn't, a black mother in South Dallas lost her polling place. Because when I wasn't, a Latino student in Oak Cliff had to drive 48 miles to vote. Because when I wasn't, they redrew us like pawns. And now they think they've cornered the Queen." She reached for her phone and hit play, the room filled with Trump's voice. "We don't need her, we need 5 more red seats. Draw her out." Kossar's eyes widened. Garcia dropped her hand from her face. Doggett cursed under his breath. Jasmine hit stop and turned toward the door. "Where are you going?" Doggett asked. "To book airtime," she replied. "Tonight. MSNBC, maybe C-SPAN, doesn't matter, they're going to hear this. Every American will." Garcia called after her. "And what if they shut you down mid-broadcast?" Jasmine didn't turn around. "They'll try, but this isn't about me anymore. This is about every district they think they can erase." She paused at the threshold, a shadow cutting through fluorescent light. Then she whispered, not to them, but to herself, to history, to the war room she was walking into. "Let's burn the map. Because when the enemy builds the stage to bury you alive, sometimes the only way to win ... is to set it on fire. The seal of the United States glared from every camera angle. Flags lined the hearing room like sharpened spears. Red, white, and blue, yet something in the air felt colorless, cold, stripped of dignity. Network anchors whispered urgent commentary from glass booths above the chamber floor. CNN, MSNBC, even Fox All had broken into live coverage. The chyron at the bottom of every screen pulsed like a siren. Live, Texas redistricting hearing could shift national power balance. The chamber buzzed like a hive about to collapse. Republicans sat stone-faced, their aides tight-lipped and over-caffeinated. Democrats whispered in clusters, eyes darting toward the clock. At 9:05 a.m., the chairman banged the gavel. But the seat marked Representative Jasmine Crockett TX30 was still empty. A minute passed, then another. And then the door opened. She walked in wearing black. Not morning black, battle black, a tailored blazer, no lapel pin, no smile. Just her, hair tied back, folder in hand. Every step echoed like a drumbeat in a funeral procession no one was ready for. Reporters turned, aides stopped breathing. The cameras zoomed in, the chairman didn't acknowledge her. Didn't have to, the room already had. As she took her seat, Representative Garrison cleared his throat and gestured toward the projection screen behind him. Today's hearing will consider adjustments to Texas congressional boundaries in accordance with population shifts. A loud cough from the public gallery interrupted him. Jasmine didn't flinch. She hadn't come for their process. She'd come for the fire beneath it. And we now recognize Representative Crockett for her opening remarks, Garrison said with a twitch. She stood, walked to the podium. Didn't look at the chairman, didn't look at her colleagues. She looked straight into the lens of the national broadcast camera and spoke like she wasn't just addressing a committee, but a country on the edge of remembering who it was. This map doesn't redraw districts, she began, voice steady. It erases people, not with ink, but with silence. Gasps fluttered through the rows. She continued. It doesn't just shift borders, it eliminates voices. It consolidates power not to govern but to dominate, and it doesn't do it in broad daylight. It does it at 2 a.m., behind locked doors, over whispered calls. She held up a printed copy of the proposed map, then turned it to face the room. Entire neighborhoods gone, voting blocks sliced. Communities cracked like broken glass. I've read every line of this map, and do you know what's missing? Accountability, justice, representation, and me. A murmur rippled through the chamber. She leaned forward, lowering her voice so only the microphone and the nation could hear. You can redraw lines, but you will not redraw who we are. For a moment, even the gavel holder forgot to move. And somewhere, off camera, a producer whispered, "We just hit 9 million viewers." She stepped back from the podium, but not before looking into the lens one last time. Can one voice rewrite a narrative written in blood and ink? Before the country forgets who it's written for. The moment Stephen Miller entered the hearing chamber, the temperature dropped 5 degrees. He didn't walk, he slithered, immaculate in a dark navy suit, silk tie the color of dried blood. He didn't glance at Jasmine Crockett, he didn't have to. His presence alone was a message. This wasn't debate. It was demolition. His briefcase clicked open with surgical precision. Inside, spreadsheets, demographic overlays, and a flash drive labeled efficiency metrics. The chairman nodded. "Mr. Miller, you may proceed." Stephen smiled, like a man confident the crime scene had already been scrubbed. "We are here today," he began, "not to suppress, but to standardize. Minority-majority districts were a noble experiment, but experiments must yield to function. This isn't about race or politics, this is about fairness." A few GOP members nodded like wind-up dolls. Jasmine didn't blink. Miller tapped his chart. "This map optimizes population ratios, streamlines governance, and improves legislative responsiveness. The racial breakdown, irrelevant. Equal vote weight is the new priority." Cameras flashed, networks cut to graphics. The phrase fairness over identity trended within minutes. Jasmine sat still as stone until the chairman turned. "Representative Crockett, do you have a response?" She rose slowly, deliberately, like someone walking into a fire without fear of burning. Her voice didn't rise, it carved. "Mr. Miller," she said, "your math is impressive, your language is elegant. But your intent is radioactive." He didn't flinch. "You talk about fairness as if it's a formula. But fairness without truth," she stepped closer, "is tyranny in a tuxedo." The gallery erupted. Some clapped, others gasped, cameras zoomed in. But behind the marble walls, in a secure suite of floors above, another drama unfolded. Trump was on speakerphone. "Is she live?" he barked. "Yes, sir," said an aide. "It's trending #Crockett clapback. I want the leak sealed. I want her discredited. I want it done tonight. Understood?" Trump's voice dropped. "And for God's sake, shut her down before she hits the folder." Back in the chamber, Miller adjusted his tie. "With all due respect, Congresswoman, you're making this personal." She stepped even closer. "It is personal. Because this map doesn't just move lines. It deletes my neighborhood, it silences churches, it fractures trust. And it tells my voters, my people, that their voice is too inconvenient for your version of order." Miller smirked. "Order, Congresswoman, is what keeps chaos from swallowing democracy." Jasmine's eyes narrowed. "No," she said. "Order without justice is chaos. You're not saving democracy. You're skinning it alive in front of a camera and calling it patriotic." Gasps, audible now. Miller turned toward the chairman. "Mr. Chairman, I object to this character assassination." But the chairman, for once, said nothing, because even he could see it. Jasmine wasn't reading from notes. She wasn't campaigning, she was detonating. And if truth had become a liability in that room, then what would they do to the woman who refused to stop speaking it? From his seat near the far-right column, Representative Jake Callahan watched the room like a man watching a fire he helped start. The hearing chamber was still reeling from Jasmine's monologue. Even Miller had gone quiet, retreating behind his spreadsheets and the steel walls of ideology. But Jake couldn't ignore the ache building in his gut, that slow, twisting weight of a truth too dangerous to name aloud. The map sat on the desk before him, pristine, sterile. The lines looked clean, the damage they would cause did not. His fingers brushed the edge of the paper as Jasmine walked past him on her way back to her seat. Their eyes met for a split second, and something shifted. She didn't glare, she didn't accuse. She just looked at him like a person, like she saw something in him he hadn't allowed himself to see in years. Jake glanced away, jaw tightening, and suddenly, he wasn't in that chamber anymore. He was 12 years old, standing in line outside the immigration office in Laredo, gripping his mother's calloused hand as she clutched a manila envelope of paperwork. She spoke no English. Her lips silently repeated a prayer to a God that had never promised her safety. The man behind the glass didn't smile, just stamped the form and moved on. She whispered to Jake that night, "You will be someone who helps, not hides." "Promise me." He had nodded. He had meant it. But promises shrink in rooms full of power. Now he sat in the most powerful room in Texas, and all he could think about was the look in Jasmine's eyes. She'd called the map what it was, a scalpel for democracy, wielded by cowards in suits. And Jake had helped sharpen that blade. He looked across the aisle. His party's leadership sat stiff, rehearsed, eyes hard with loyalty to someone who wasn't even in the room. Trump didn't need to be here. His shadow sat in every empty corner. His orders had already been executed in ink. Jake's throat burned. He thought of the mask in his district, the one that would vanish under the new map. The community center in Hidalgo, the farm worker clinics in Webb County. They weren't collateral, they were sacrifices. Sacrifice to appease a man who saw governance as conquest. And now he had a choice. He could vote with the party, preserve his seat, stay quiet, survive. Or he could stand up, say something, risk everything. But then what? They'd gut his career, brand him a traitor, replace him before the ink dried. He rubbed the bridge of his nose and exhaled. Jasmine was still speaking to the cameras now, but her words had lodged themselves under his ribs. He looked down at the map again, and this time, it didn't look like a plan. It looked like a wound. Am I the villain, he thought, in someone's freedom story? And if I am, how many stories will end before I have the courage to change my own? The Capitol restroom was too quiet, to clean. The kind of quiet you only find in places about to erupt. Jasmine locked the stool behind her, dropped the lid on the toilet seat, and sat down like she was taking shelter before a bomb went off. Her black handbag slid off her shoulder and landed on her lap. She didn't reach for her phone, she reached for the red folder. The one she hadn't opened since January 6th, the one that had travelled with her to every committee hearing but never left her grip, until now. She ran her thumb across the top, pausing at the frayed corner where the leather had cracked. One deep breath, then the snap of the latch. Inside, 3 items. A sealed memo stamped DOJ's only with the subject line, Unauthorized Political Cartography, Texas Case File 703B. A printed satellite image showing a private estate in Westlake, Texas, with timestamps, overhead drones, and heat signatures surrounding what appeared to be a basement meeting. And finally, the audio, labelled in pen, Trump Red Sweep Directive. Her finger hovered over the play icon. She hadn't listened to the whole thing before. Only snippets, but the voice was unmistakable. I don't care how you redraw it. Just get her out. You hear me? I want Crockett gone. Make it legal, make it permanent. I don't want to see her name in a single zip code that matters. Jasmine snapped the folder shut. Her heartbeat was a war drum now. Outside the restroom, a voice echoed in the hallway, she's been in there too long. Samira Holt, young independent journalist, live streaming from her phone, was still narrating outside the hearing room. Her voice cracked through the feed with a perfect mix of hope and desperation. She has the folder. I saw it in her hand. The same red one she carried into the voting rights walkout. The question is, will she finally open it? Will she release what's inside? Over 200,000 people were watching the stream. Hashtags flooded the screen. Hashtag burn the map. Hashtag Crockett the Escalath. Hashtag DOJ leaks. And rising fastest. Hashtag will she? Jasmine stared at her reflection in the mirror above the sink. Her eyes weren't afraid. They were exhausted. But something flickered behind them, the same fire that had carried her out of law school into courtrooms, into protests, into Congress. This folder could end her, she knew that. It could be labelled as fabricated, foreign influenced, illegally obtained. They could indict her before sunset. But it could also end them. She unlocked the door, stepped into the hallway, folder in hand. Samira's phone lens caught her the moment she emerged. Congresswoman Crockett, Samira whispered into her stream, are you about to show America what it was never supposed to see? Jasmine didn't speak. She looked directly into the phone and held up the folder. Anne smiled, not a smile of confidence, but of defiance sharpened into steel. Because if you hold the match, do you fear the fire, or the silence that comes if you never strike? Beto's voice was hushed, but the weight behind it was crushing. Someone in your inner circle fed strategy to Miller's team. We traced a back-channel briefing memo. It had timestamps, Jasmine. It had your talking points. Jasmine froze mid-step in the basement corridor behind the chamber. The old concrete walls trembled faintly from distant crowd noise above, but here it was tomb silent. Her red folder felt heavier than it had 10 minutes ago. You're saying they didn't just guess where I'd go with the leak? They knew, she asked, almost not wanting an answer. Beto nodded. They were waiting for it. This wasn't just surveillance. It was prediction. Her thoughts raced Garcia. She had been cold, distant, cautious, but no, not a traitor. Dogged, too proud, too angry to plot. Then, her pulse stalled. One name. One possibility she hadn't let herself consider, Kossar. She spun on her heel and stormed through the side passage, up the steps, and into the closed conference lounge just off the main chamber, and there he was. Congressman Greg Kossar, alone, typing something on his phone, too casual, too calm, like a man who already knew how the story ends. You want to tell me why Trump's team had a transcript of my rebuttal before I even said it? She said sharply, slamming the folder down on the table. He looked up, slow, calculating. Jasmine, no more spin. Just tell me how long you've been feeding them pieces of me. He sighed. It wasn't like that. Oh, really? Because to me, it feels like I was traded like cattle. Greg stood, face tightening. They offered me a choice. Merge with South Austin and get swallowed up, or hold my district intact and give up an adjacent seat. I didn't know they'd pick yours. She stared at him, mouth slightly open, disbelieving. Yes, you did. He didn't deny it. I thought maybe they'd take Dockett's, maybe Sylvia's. I don't know, but I had to make a call, he said. I was protecting my people. Her voice dropped, sharp as a razor. And mine weren't people. He looked away. She took a step forward. You stood with me when we fled to DC. You chanted with me about voter suppression. You raised your damn fist on the Capitol steps and shouted solidarity, and the whole time you were negotiating my erasure behind the curtain. His face twisted. You think I'm proud of it? You think this doesn't eat me alive? Jasmine didn't blink. No, I think you got used to being scared of them. So you made peace with being useful. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was surgical. She gathered her folder slowly. The betrayal wasn't just strategic, it was spiritual. It had come from someone who knew her fire and chose to douse it with convenience. As she turned to leave, Karsar whispered, if you burn this whole thing down, what's left for us to stand on? She didn't even look back. Whatever rises from the ashes will be cleaner than what you just built on my back. Because how do you stand tall when betrayal doesn't come from across the aisle, but from the hand you thought was holding yours? Jasmine Crockett sat alone in the holding room behind the chamber, the red folder opened before her like a detonator. One thumb hovered over the file on her phone. Trump_red sweep_directive.wav 38 seconds of raw political rot. His voice, his plan, his intent. She could already hear the spin. Deepfake, illegally obtained, taken out of context. But she also heard something else, her mother's voice. Don't you ever let them turn you into what they fear most. Quiet. The memory hit hard, vivid as if it happened yesterday. Her mother scrubbing blood out of her white nurse's uniform after a protester was beaten at a downtown march. Jasmine was only 14, watching from the kitchen table. You'll fight with words, her mother had whispered that night. And if they don't listen to words, you make them bleed truth. She had, law school, defense work, standing between black mothers and a system built to punish their survival. She remembered the cases they never aired, like the teenage boy arrested for loitering in a laundromat while waiting for his grandmother's clothes to dry. Or the woman evicted because her rent check bounced by 37 cents. She hadn't run for Congress to be polite, she ran because silence is what power depends on. And today, that silence would end. She opened her livestream app. Title, Let's Finish What They Started. Viewers, 1,284, then 9,271. Then 33,000. The numbers surged like adrenaline. She didn't check the comments. She didn't need courage from strangers. She held up the red folder in frame. This is not a stunt. This is not partisan. Her voice was steady. This is proof. She tapped play. Trump's voice burned through the stream. Get her out. Don't care how. I want Crockett gone. Make it legal. Make it permanent. Do it before the networks catch on. Gasps erupted across the Capitol. Phones lit up like flares. Stephen Miller's aide sprinted toward the chamber doors. Fox News cut live to commercial. Inside the hearing room, chaos broke the facade of order. Reporters shouted. Lawmakers stood, startled, some shaking, some already dialing damage control, but Jasmine didn't move. She just watched the fire spread. A staffer burst into the room behind her. They're trying to cut the feed. Jasmine glanced back. Come, they're already too late. The livestream count crossed to 0.1 million. From the hallway, she could hear someone shouting orders. She recognized the voice, Miller's. She whispered to herself, low and resolute, let them come. I was never meant to survive this stage quietly anyway. Then she stared straight into the lens. No blinking, no retreat. Secrets die in the dark. Today, we bring matches. And as the broadcast surged across every screen in the country, Jasmine Crockett let power watch itself unravel frame by damning frame. Because when the empire's secrets are laid bare, the only question left is how far will it go to keep its throne from burning. The room had been loud seconds earlier. Voices overlapping, reporters scrambling, aides whispering frantically into headsets, Republican lawmakers trying to motion for recess. All of it suddenly collapsed into stillness when the playback hit the 10-second mark. The audio crackled, then cleared. And then 8 words, delivered in Donald Trump's unmistakable sneer, detonated across every speaker in the chamber. Cut her district. She's too loud, too black. The silence didn't come gradually. It dropped like a trapdoor. For a beat, no one breathed. Chairs froze mid-shift, paperwork sat untouched. The screen showing Jasmine's live stream flickered, but stayed alive. No one moved. On the far left aisle, one Republican aide dropped their tablet. It clattered loudly against the marble, the only sound in the room. Jasmine Crockett stood still beside the podium. She didn't smirk, didn't flinch, didn't gloat. She simply watched the room absorb what it had just heard like a body going into shock. Across the aisle, Representative Jake Callahan sat motionless, eyes locked on the floor. A full minute passed before he pushed back his chair slowly. The scrape echoed, every eye turned. Jake stood up, straightened his tie, and said nothing. But the look on his face said everything: rage, shame, reckoning. Then he walked out, just like that. A sitting Republican congressman walked out of a redistricting hearing mid-session, on live television, with no explanation, no spin. Fox News didn't cut away this time, they froze. Even they couldn't spin it fast enough. The chairman blinked like he'd been slapped, his mouth opened, then closed. His gavel hand twitched. We need a moment to review. No, Mr. Chairman, Jasmine cut in, her voice sharp but calm, slicing through the tension like wire. You don't need a moment, you need a mirror. Gasps from the public gallery. She stepped forward. That wasn't a dog whistle. That was a bullhorn. That wasn't strategy. That was white supremacy in high definition, confirmed by the highest officeholder this party has ever produced. Someone on the committee tried to object. She didn't stop. He didn't say I was wrong. He said I was too black, too loud, too inconvenient to fit inside the democracy he's trying to reshape like Play-Doh. Cameras zoomed tighter, live stream viewership crossed for 0.3 million. She turned toward the press gallery. You've heard it, America's heard it. So now the question isn't whether they said it. She looked back at the committee. It's whether you will stay seated after hearing it. No one answered. Even Stephen Miller, seated just behind the GOP counsel, had lost the smugness on his face. Jasmine lowered her mic, her hands didn't shake. She had expected this moment her entire career. Not the silence, but the fear that follows truth like a shadow. The kind of truth you can't spin, redact, or file away in committee. Because once the quiet part has been said out loud, what excuse does silence have left? By the time the clip of Trump's voice finished echoing across the chamber walls, the real chaos had moved beyond them. Screens lit up, phones vibrated violently. Democracy had left the building and entered the bloodstream of America. Fox News cut away first. The anchor's voice cracked mid-sentence. We cannot confirm the authenticity of the audio released by Congresswoman Crockett. We urge caution. But it was too late. The footage was already clipped, looped, subtitled, and viral. MSNBC played the full clip on repeat. CNN added historical context. Twitter became a war zone. Hashtag #TooLoudTooBlack. Hashtag Crockett leak. Hashtag redistricting grunk. All trended simultaneously. Within 7 minutes, the clip had been viewed 23 million times. By 10, the DOJ press line was flooded. Is there an active investigation into federal election interference? One reporter shouted outside the Capitol. Is Trump under criminal review for targeted suppression of minority voters? No comment. Not yet. Inside the chamber, the walls weren't just cracking, they were collapsing. Stephen Miller, who had remained seated behind his legal counsel throughout Jasmine's livestream, now leaned toward a staffer with lips like razors. We have to leave now. But she just changed the temperature in the room, Miller snapped. I don't play in fire, I build it. He slipped out through a side corridor as reporters surged forward, demanding comment. He didn't give one. Across the aisle, GOP reps huddled like survivors of a political earthquake. Some shouted for adjournment, others hissed that it would make them look guilty. One whispered, just wait for the lawsuit. It arrived faster than expected. At 1:24 p.m., Trump posted from Truth Social. Jasmine Crockett just illegally broadcasted classified government material. Expect a full emergency lawsuit for espionage and election tampering. We will not be silent while radicals weaponize fake tapes to cancel the truth. #America First. It hit like a lightning bolt, not just because of what it said, but what it meant. He wasn't denying the tape, he was attacking the woman who dared play it. Back in the hearing chamber, Jasmine sat alone at her seat. She had stopped checking her phone, the numbers didn't matter anymore. What mattered was the silence, it had changed. It wasn't the silence of power, it was the silence of panic. One Democratic aide leaned toward her and whispered, "You just threw gasoline on the Constitution." And the question now wasn't whether she had the right to light the flame. It was whether anyone else had the courage to carry it. When the truth becomes contraband, who's brave enough to smuggle it into history? The air in the chamber was different now, not heavy, but charged, like the moment before thunder rips through the sky. Something had shifted, something irreversible. Sylvia Garcia sat at the edge of her desk, fingers laced tightly, eyes locked on Jasmine across the aisle. The woman who had just detonated a presidential cover-up with 38 seconds of truth was now completely still, hands folded, eyes forward, as if daring the silence to speak before she did. Garcia had been silent long enough. For weeks, she'd played the strategist, the calm voice in the caucus meetings, the one cautioning against escalation. "Let's not make it about us," she'd said. "Let's protect what we can," but Jasmine had changed the equation. Jasmine hadn't flinched when they threatened her seat, her name, her future. She'd thrown the match into the powder keg and reminded Garcia what it meant to stand for something before it became convenient. The chairman cleared his throat. "If there are no further comments before the procedural vote." "Mr. Chairman," Garcia stood, gasps, not one or two. A dozen, then silence, all cameras pivoted. "I'd like to make a statement for the record," she said, voice steady but not rehearsed. "Not on behalf of my party, on behalf of myself, as a woman who forgot why she took this job." The room leaned in, she turned toward Jasmine. "When I first saw the red map, I was scared. Scared for my district, scared for my people. But also, if I'm honest, scared for myself. I saw what they were doing to you, Jasmine. And I looked away. A beat passed. I chose comfort over courage. I told myself I was protecting what I could. But the truth is, I was negotiating the size of our coffin." Gasps again, reporters scribbled furiously. Phones lit up. Garcia's voice grew stronger. "We talk about strategy like it's survival, but survival for who? What good is keeping a seat if we lose the soul that filled it?" She turned back to the chairman. "Strike my prior neutrality from the record. I stand with Representative Crockett. This map is not redistricting. It is red erasing, and I will not be complicit." The room erupted, not with cheers, but with tension fracturing at the seams. Republicans whispered in panic. Democrats stared in disbelief. And Jasmine didn't move. But she looked up, just once, and nodded. Behind the scenes, aides scrambled. The whip count was changing fast. The floor vote was minutes away. What had been certain an hour ago was now unstable. What had been invincible was beginning to crack. Down with her. She didn't look away from the front of the chamber. "I'm not going down," she said. "I'm finally standing up." And when the winds shift without warning, will the map they carved in secrecy still hold, or will it shatter beneath the weight of those who chose to rise? Every chair was filled, not just with bodies, with watchers, whisperers, warmakers. The gallery pulsed with tension, security lined every aisle. The media pit overflowed, lenses aimed like weapons. Livestream feeds ticked past 11 million views, with YouTube, Twitter, and even TikTok simulcasting the hearing under one unanimous banner, the vote that could reshape America. But the woman they tried to erase walked in last. Jasmine Crockett moved with slow precision, clad in deep navy, folder in hand. She didn't scan the room, she didn't need to. The battlefield had already been drawn, and she stood at the center of its final line. Chairman Garrison cleared his throat. "We now proceed to vote on proposed House Resolution 908, redistricting alignment for Texas congressional districts. Members will have 2 minutes for final remarks. Lawmakers spoke, some stumbled through scripts. Others read off party-approved blurbs, but Jasmine waited. Sat silent as dominoes tipped one by one, then it was her turn. She rose. I've listened to every justification, every euphemism, every clean word used to cover up this brutal blueprint. They call it realignment, they call it efficiency, but let's be honest, this isn't about governance. It's about ghosting entire communities. Cameras zoomed in, the chamber hushed. This map doesn't just redraw lines, it bulldozes trust. It surgically removes black and brown voices from where they've been fighting to be heard, and places them where they're statistically less likely to vote, less likely to win, less likely to even be seen. She held up the copy of the leaked redistricting map. This isn't policy, this is political arson. And then, the doors opened, Secret Service poured in. Half the room turned before the name was even spoken. But everyone knew Donald J. Trump had arrived. Not on screen, not by statement, in person. Wearing his trademark scowl and overconfidence, he entered the chamber like he still owned it. His team had said he wouldn't appear, his lawyers had advised against it. But here he was, not testifying, not invited, just walking in like a conqueror returning to survey his land. The air thickened. Jasmine didn't flinch. Her voice never wavered. You tried to erase me, she said, now looking directly at him. You tried to cut my name from a map like it was graffiti on your empire. But I'm still here, and the only thing being erased today. She held up the red folder. Is the lie you built this country's silence on? Trump didn't speak. His face tightened, jaw clenched, but he said nothing. Because even he knew. This wasn't his room anymore. Jasmine turned back to the mic. We vote today not just on borders. We vote on whether America still has a pulse. This isn't about partisanship, it's about presence. The presence of every kid in Oak Cliff, every mother in McAllen. Every voice that refuses to be redlined into disappearance. She paused, then whispered, this isn't just a map. It's a mirror. And what do you say when the man who tried to erase you walks into your house and finds you holding the pen? The room hadn't recovered from Jasmine's words when Trump raised his hand, not to object, not to motion, but to speak. I want the mic, he said flatly. The chairman stammered. Mr. Trump, with all due respect, you're not a sitting member. I'm a former president, Trump barked. The room listens when I speak. A pause, then chaos, staffers whispered furiously. Council clutched pocket constitutions, live-stream comment counters exploded in real time. Jake Callahan stood, visibly alarmed, but said nothing. The chairman hesitated, then nodded once. You may proceed, briefly. Trump strode toward the center like a man reclaiming lost territory. He adjusted his cufflinks as if preparing for a handshake that would never come. The crowd leaned in. He didn't raise his voice. That wasn't necessary. I don't care what your cameras say. I don't care what some congresswoman thinks she's exposing. What we are seeing here today is not justice, it's a coup in pearls. Murmurs surged. He scanned the chamber with the calm of someone who'd already placed the pieces. You think this ends with a map? It doesn't. You take away Republican strongholds, you will have riots. You undermine integrity, you will have anarchy. This is not just redistricting, it's destabilization. A sharp breath from the gallery. A GOP senator nodded faintly. Jasmine didn't move. Trump's voice turned darker. Let me be very clear. If these hearings proceed, if my words are used as weapons, I will use every legal, political, and personal avenue to ensure this country remembers who holds the real gavel. And I promise you none of you are ready for that trial. He smirked. Because once I win again, your folder becomes kindling. That was his move, an open threat veiled as patriotism. Power disguised as prophecy, the old Trump, familiar and venomous. Then Jasmine stood again, no anger, no tremble. Just precision. She walked forward, reached into her blazer, and held up a second USB. The room inhaled. This one isn't for the media, she said, voice steady as steel. It's already been sent to the Department of Justice, filed this morning. With verified transcripts, satellite logs, Classified internal documents, everything you just threatened to bury. Trump blinked. For the first time, his lips parted but no sound followed. She continued, "The DOJ complaint is logged under Title 18, Section 595, Interference with Political Rights, with supplemental charges tied to election obstruction, minority voter targeting, and conspiracy to disenfranchise federally protected communities." Stephen Miller stood in the back, ghost white. Jasmine stepped even closer. "You thought I came to fight a map. But I came to fight a machine, and machines fall." The USB clicked as she pocketed it again. Then she stared Trump in the face. "You gambled everything on no one ever challenging the dealer." He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. "Now the house is on fire," she said, stepping away, "and all you're holding is ash. Because when the empire's foundations crumble, what does it reach for first? Its crown or its shield?" The digital clock above the chamber read 12:59 p.m. sharp, unforgiving, like the hour itself knew something seismic was about to snap. The chairman stood. "We will now proceed to vote on House Resolution 908, the proposed redistricting map for the state of Texas." The silence was taut enough to break bone. One by one, the roll call began. Aye, no. Aye, no, aye. The red lights blinked alive on the panel. YS 210. Green lights flickered back. Nitrogen monoxide minus 206. Jasmine sat motionless, fingers pressed together, lips sealed. But her heart was pacing like it was racing against extinction. Across the aisle, Trump leaned forward, elbows on knees, watching, calculating. Then came the final name. Representative Jake Callahan. A pause. Longer than it should have been. The entire chamber turned. Jake didn't move. His finger hovered over the button. Trump's eyes locked on him like a sniper sighting. Behind Jake, aides mouthed, "Stay with the party." Jake stood. "I was raised to believe in fairness," he began, voice tracking. "I was taught that the vote was sacred. That a district wasn't just a shape on a map, it was a story, a church, a language, a soul." He looked across at Jasmine, who met his gaze without blinking. "My mother wasn't born here," he said. "She cleaned offices at nights so I could stand here today. She didn't vote until she was 46, and now I'm being asked to erase people like her, not with violence, but with paperwork." He pressed the button. No. The chamber exploded. Gasps, cries, shouts. One GOP rep slammed their binder shut, another cursed audibly. Journalists stood and pointed toward the screen as the final tally burned into history. Yes, minus 217. No, minus 218. The map failed. Jasmine closed her folder slowly, deliberately, like a priest closing a casket at the end of a war. She didn't smile, she didn't celebrate. She simply exhaled, as if she'd been holding her breath for years. Across the chamber, Trump stood up, but this time it wasn't with authority. It was with disbelief. His face reddened, fists clenched. But the gavel struck before he could speak. Motion fails, resolution denied, history. Stephen Miller was gone. Garcia wept quietly behind her desk. Jake Callahan sat down like the floor had dropped beneath him. And Jasmine, she looked straight into the public gallery, where Samira Holt's livestream still ran at 19 million viewers. She leaned into the mic. "Just once more, this isn't the end," she said. "This is proof that when you throw lies into the fire, sometimes truth walks out alive." Then she rose and walked out without another word. Past the cameras, past the chaos, past the man who tried to delete her. Because her work wasn't finished. Not yet. So can a nation redraw itself not with lies, not with fear, but with a pen held by the people it tried for decades to silence? We're about to find out. The first threat arrived less than 12 hours after the vote. A single envelope, no return address, no stamp. Just the words, "You made the map bleed. Now we'll make you pay." It was slipped under her office door like a whisper from the abyss. Inside, a Polaroid photo of Jasmine with a red X scrawled over her face in permanent marker. No signature, no handwriting, just rage. Handwriting, just rage. By morning, her Dallas district office windows were smashed glass and flyers strewn across the sidewalk. The flyers bore her face with the words, "Traitor to Texas," in all caps. Spray painted over the glass doors. stay silent or stay buried, and still she showed up. No bodyguard, no vest, no apologies, just Jasmine Crockett, walking past shattered glass in a navy coat and red heels like the sidewalk belonged to her, because it did. Her team begged her to accept Capitol Police protection. She refused. "You're not bulletproof," her aide whispered, tears clinging to her voice. "No," Jasmine said softly, "but neither is truth. And we are still asking it to walk." That afternoon, the world saw her coast. Samira Holt published her expose. Headline: "The Cost of Courage. What Jasmine Crockett Sacrificed to Redraw America." The piece spread like fire. It detailed the threats, the doxing, the hacked voicemails of Jasmine's elderly mother. It listed the menacing calls to staffers, the severed internet lines in her Dallas field office, the anonymous emails threatening her nieces. And it ended with Samira's own reflection: "There is a special kind of violence reserved for women who refuse to sit down when told. But there is an even more terrifying silence reserved for the country that watches and lets it happen." Congress paused briefly, but not enough. By midnight, Fox News ran a segment questioning whether Jasmine had faked the threats to garner sympathy before her potential indictment. One panelist smirked and asked, if she was really in danger, wouldn't she be hiding? She wasn't. The next morning, Jasmine arrived at the Capitol. Reporters circled like carrion. One called out, "Congresswoman, do you feel safe?" She stopped, turned, looked dead into the camera. "I don't feel safe. I feel necessary." The quote went viral within the hour. Etched into protest signs, printed on shirts. Whispered in community meetings, tweeted with every new update on the DOJ investigation. Still, the threats came. Still, she showed up. Because this wasn't about being fearless. It was about being unwilling to disappear. Her chief of staff found her alone that evening, sitting in her office lit only by desk lamp and streetlight. She was rereading letters from students, handwritten notes thanking her for fighting with her face visible. "You should go home," he said quietly. She folded the last letter. "I am home." She stood, gazing out over the Capitol. Because the real question isn't how much one woman can carry before the nation breaks her. It's how many nations have already broken because no one ever dared to carry it at all. It didn't start with a bang, it started with a subject line. Department of Justice, Notice of Formal Inquiry, Federal Redistricting Abuse Investigation. The document was only 9 pages long, but it sent shockwaves across Capitol Hill like an earthquake hidden beneath marble floors. The DOJ had opened an official probe into the Texas redistricting scandal. Key focus: deliberate minority disenfranchisement. Primary subject: Donald J. Trump. Subpoenas followed. Miller lawyered up. Congressional aides vanished behind NDAs and shuttered Twitter accounts. Former staffers came forward quietly, anonymously, then publicly. And in the middle of it all, Representative Jake Callahan stood in front of a podium, flanked by flags and silence. "I'm resigning from the Republican Party effective immediately," he announced. "Because what we built isn't a movement anymore. It's a machine that eats its own, and I won't feed it." Reporters shouted over each other. "Do you regret voting with them for the last 8 years? Are you cooperating with DOJ?" He answered only once, "I regret every vote that made erasure look like strategy." Back in Trump's camp, panic had become policy. His legal team fired out cease and desists like confetti. His surrogates flooded media with claims of entrapment, doctored audio, witch hunts. But the base was fracturing and the walls were closing in. Then came the second testimony. Jasmine Crockett, under oath, before the nation, before history. The hearing chamber was packed, not just with bodies, with pressure. With every reporter who once wrote her off. With every voter who once feared their voice didn't matter. With every camera that used to pan past her. She stood behind the mic like it was a witness box, calm, fire-forged, unshaken. "I submitted my evidence not to destroy a man, but to defend a people," she said. "I'm not here because I hate redistricting. I'm here because I love representation. And I refuse to let it be traded like a stock option on a donor's wish list." She laid out the timeline, the audio, the strategy leaks, the sealed memos, the deals made behind doors that never should have been shut. She didn't flinch once. One senator tried to cut her off. "You're making this personal." She turned, cool and lethal. It was made personal when my district was turned into a casualty map. And the room went still. CSPAN's viewership shattered records. Twitter caught fire again. Hashtag Crockett testifies. Hashtag read Lina reckoning. Hashtag districts are people. Trump's campaign manager was seen leaving a closed-door meeting pale and sweating. Fundraising calls were met with donor hesitation. And outside the courthouse, protesters didn't chant. They stood in silence, holding maps, torn, inked, erased. Because now the whole country could see it. The map wasn't lines, it was lives, and the reckoning had only just begun. What if the thunder we thought marked the storm was only the sound of the floodgates breaking loose? And what if the flood doesn't drown us but forces us, finally, to swim towards something cleaner? The folder was finally closed. The subpoenas were signed, the headlines written, the votes counted, the lines stopped for now. But the war was far from over, and Jasmine Crockett knew it. You don't tear open the belly of a machine this powerful and walk away untouched. So when her staff found her alone in the office, surrounded by unopened mail and exhausted silence, they didn't say a word. They just left the last envelope on her desk, addressed in pencil, the return name shaky but proud. Lucia Reyes, age 12. She opened it slowly, fingers trembling not from fear this time, but from something far more dangerous, hope. Inside was lined notebook paper, carefully folded, slightly smudged, like it had been rewritten a dozen times. Dear Congresswoman Jasmine, my name is Lucia, I am 12 years old. I live in El Paso. I saw your video. My mom cried. I never saw her cry before. She said you were brave and loud, and one of us, my school, said our neighborhood might not count anymore on the map. But you made me feel like I do count. You made me feel seen. When I grow up, I want to be just like you or better. I don't know what Congress does, but I know you're not afraid. Please don't stop, even if they're mean. Even if they break windows. Even if they say you don't belong. Because you do, and now, I think maybe. I do too, love, Lucia. Jasmine stared at the paper, reading every word twice, then a third time. Then the tears came slow, sudden, unstoppable, not silent tears, not dignified tears. But the kind that crash out when your armor finally cracks and something inside you dares to exhale for the first time in years. She turned her chair toward the window, away from the Capitol lights and toward the sky that stretched all the way to El Paso. She held Lucia's letter like scripture. No trending hashtag, no DOJ memo, no televised monologue had ever hit her like this. Because this wasn't policy, this was proof. Proof that the fight hadn't just pushed back the tide, it had reached someone. A little girl in a forgotten district, with a broken pencil and a dream too big to fit inside the boxes they'd drawn for her. And maybe that was the point. Jasmine whispered to herself, eyes still wet, maybe we're not erased. She clutched the letter to her chest, breath trembling, heart heavier but somehow whole. Maybe we're rewriting, because if the story was never theirs to tell, then maybe it's time we stopped asking for a page and started taking back the pen. The rec center was standing room only. Folding chairs lined the basketball court, stacked 3 deep in the back, no camera crews, no podium. Just a mic on a scratched wooden table, one flag in the corner, and the heat of 100 stories waiting to be heard. Jasmine Crockett stepped into a roar, not of applause, but recognition. From black pastors who remembered marching beside her. From immigrant workers who spoke Spanish, Creole, and silence. From college students who had skipped finals to get there, some wore shirts with her face. Others just wore the exhaustion of watching history try to forget them. She didn't speak right away. She looked around the room first, like someone checking for survivors. Then she stepped to the mic and said, "We weren't supposed to be here, but here we are." The crowd hushed. She walked them through the battle, the leaked map, the red folder, the vote that failed by one breath, one spine, one conscience. She told them about the letter from Lucia, about the windows smashed, the threats mailed, the calls that still came at 3 a.m. and then she paused. A man in the 4th row, older, Union jacket, hands like history books, raised his hand. He didn't shout, he just asked, was it worth it? Jasmine looked at him for a long time, then she smiled, soft, fierce. Ask your children in 20 years. The room held its breath. She continued, if they can still vote, if they can still speak without fear, if they know their voices were never too small, too brown, too inconvenient to matter, then yeah. It was worth every threat, every lie, every broken window. She stepped back, eyes sharp with something deeper than pride. Not defiance, not survival, something older, like reclamation. Because what's the value of your voice if you never use it to shatter the silence built to contain you? The corridor beneath the Capitol was colder than it should have been. Concrete walls, no windows, just echoes. Jasmine walked with purpose, the rhythm of her heels a defiant metronome against silence that had lasted too long. Then she saw him, Stephen Miller, leaning against a pillar like a man trying to vanish into the building he helped poison. Same suit, same smirk, but something in his posture had fractured. Gone was the venomous confidence. In its place, something more dangerous. A slow, simmering arrogance that knew the game wasn't over, just paused. He didn't look surprised to see her. I hear the DOJ might indict half my old friends, he muttered without turning. Jasmine didn't stop walking. You should have picked better friends. He finally looked at her, eyes narrow. You only slowed it down. That's all you ever do. Delay the inevitable. She stopped, right in front of him. Inevitable. She repeated, voice low, razor steady. He nodded, almost pitiful. Power doesn't go quietly, Crockett. You redrew a vote. We'll redraw the map again. Next time deeper, cleaner, quietly. She leaned in, eyes locked. Good, she said. Because now the country's listening for the quiet. He blinked. That caught him off guard. She stepped even closer, her breath warm, her voice ice. You say I only slowed it down, her voice sharpened. Then maybe that's long enough for the people to catch up. And if they do, if they realize this democracy is still theirs, that their voice is more than a district code, then slowing you down was the spark. Miller didn't respond, but the smirk cracked. Jasmine turned to leave, then paused, just once more. Here's the difference between you and me, Stephen. You think truth is a threat, I think it's a match. She walked away without looking back, her figure dissolving into the tunnel's vanishing point. And Miller, for the first time, had no response. So can a delay be the seed of revolution, or is it just the breath we take before the fire finally reaches the root? The studio lights dimmed around her, but the silence felt even brighter. No applause, no producers whispering in her earpiece. Just Jasmine Crockett alone at the desk, live, coast to coast, with 42 million people watching. No teleprompter, no script, just history and the hum of a camera waiting to record either a fall or a fire. She inhaled slowly, not for composure but to remember who she was breathing for. Her voice, when it came, was steady, but it carried the weight of every time it hadn't been allowed to rise. This fight, she began, was never just mine. It was never just about me keeping a seat, or a microphone, or a boundary line on a map. She leaned forward, the lens caught her eyes glinting not with tears, but clarity. This was about the girl who watched her neighborhood vanish with a single vote. The veteran whose ballot never counted, the immigrant father whose story never fit on any form. And the child who asked me, why don't they want people like us on the map? A pause, not for drama, but gravity. I want you to know your story matters, your district matters. Your voice was never supposed to be quiet, it was forced into silence. She looked into the lens as if it were a mirror. I didn't fight for a headline. I fought so one day, your name can't be erased with a pen stroke. So your future can't be bartered in a hallway deal. So our truth can't be filed away in a sealed drawer ever again. The screen lingered as she delivered the final line, voice barely a whisper, yet louder than any gavel ever slammed. If you've ever felt unheard, this moment is yours. If you've ever been unseen, this is your light. Then, direct to the viewer, comment below. What truth still needs to be unsealed? A slow fade to black. Then, etched in white against the darkness, final words that didn't just close the chapter. They rewrote the whole book. They tried to erase her. Instead, she redrew the nation. In a world where silence is often rewarded and truth is treated like contraband, Jasmine Crockett reminds us that courage isn't loud, it's persistent. This story teaches us that your voice, no matter how small, can shake systems if you refuse to bow. Maps can erase names, but conviction redraws nations. You don't need permission to be powerful, you just need purpose. Now it's your turn. What truth in your life have you been too afraid to say out loud? Comment below. Let's make this more than a story, let's make it a chorus. One voice at a time. Thank you for watching until this moment and for standing with us on this journey for justice. Your support means everything. Like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss